Welcome to episode 2. 17 days before they were scheduled to kill me, I finally had proof. 8 words on a faded jail log that said I couldn't have been where the informant claimed I was. Infirmary, Inmate, Cole, Darius, holding C, 7, vacant. But having proof and getting someone to listen? Those are two very different things when you're on death row. This is what happened when a condemned man with a law book fought the clock and won. The hunt for evidence. After I found that sentence in the trial transcript, the informant claiming I confessed in holding cell C, 7 on August 10th, I knew I had something. Because I remembered that night. The asthma attack. The panic. The infirmary. But memory isn't evidence. Paper is. It took 2 years of filing requests, motions, begging, arguing, and being ignored to get those jail logs. 2 years while the clock on my life kept ticking down. Every request came back the same. Denied, lost, unavailable, processing, denied again. I wrote to the warden, the prison records department, the court, the state's attorney. Nothing. Meanwhile, my appeals were running out. You only get so many bites at the apple, and I'd already burned through most of them with generic motions written by lawyers who didn't believe me anyway. Then one day, year 10 on death row, a guard slid a thin manila envelope under my door like it was nothing. Inside were photocopies of the jail logs. My hands were shaking so bad I almost couldn't read them. August 10th, 1994. There it was in faded ink. Infirmary, Inmate, Cole, Darius, 2213, shortness of breath. Holding cell C7, vacant. The informant didn't just remember wrong. He lied. On the stand. Under oath. About the exact place the confession supposedly happened. And no one had ever put that beside his testimony. Not my lawyer. Not the prosecutor. Not the judge. Not the jury. I sat on my bunk holding that page for an hour, just staring at it. This was it. This was the proof. But I had a problem. My execution date had just been set. 64 days. The race against time. I wrote an emergency motion by hand. 73 pages. I wrote until my knuckles bled and my handwriting went from neat to wild. I quoted Crawford. I laid out the timeline. I attached the logs. I sent it to every court that could possibly touch my case. I sent copies to the governor's office, the ACLU, the Innocence Project, any address I could find in the dusty law books. Most never answered. 14 days until execution. 10. 8. I'd wake up in the middle of the night sure I heard them coming for me. Everything sounded like footsteps. The guards started looking at me different. Quieter. Like I was already a ghost. One of them asked me what I wanted for my last meal. I told him, I'm not ordering. I'm innocent. He just nodded and walked away. Then the phone in the counselor's office rang for me. It was a woman from the ACLU. Mr. Cole, she said, I need to ask you a question. Yeah. Where did you go to law school? I laughed. It came out more like a choke. I'm on death row, I said. There was this silence on the line. The kind that tells you someone just had their world rearranged by one sentence. She told me my motion was some of the best legal writing she'd seen from a non-lawyer. She said they were taking my case. They had 12 days. The final countdown. They filed everything they could. Emergency stays. Habeas petitions. Motions to reopen. Appeals. Most came back fast with one word. Denied. 7 days. 5. 3. News crews started talking about me. Death row inmate may be innocent. Hashtags. Protests outside the prison with my name on cardboard signs. Strangers chanting for a man they'd never met. My mom came to visit. She was sick by then. Cancer she'd been hiding from me for months because she didn't want to add to my stress. She pressed her hand against the glass. You're gonna walk out of here, baby, she said. I know it. I wanted to believe her. But I'd been disappointed too many times. 48 hours before the execution, the governor reviewed my file personally. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Just sat on my bunk staring at the ceiling, wondering if they'd wake me up at 3 a.m. or if they'd let me see the sunrise one last time. At 11:47 p.m., 61 minutes before they would have started prepping me, a guard came to my cell. I'll never forget his face. Hard man. But his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Cole, he said, they stated. I didn't say anything. I just sat down on the concrete floor because my legs wouldn't hold me. The freedom. It took 11 more months before the conviction was officially vacated. On December 18th, 2003, I walked out of prison into winter sunlight that felt like it was burning my skin off. I'd spent 9 years and 4 months on death row. For a murder I didn't commit. My mom was there. Thin. Weak. But standing. She hugged me so hard I thought we'd both break. 3 months later, she died. I got to hold her hand as a free man. That's the only mercy I got out of those 9 years. You'd think that's where the story ends. It isn't. When I got out, I had nothing. No money. No work history that anyone cared about. A giant hole in my 20s, and a head full of case law. So I went back to school. Community college first. Sitting in classes with kids who were in elementary school when I was sentenced to die. Then University of Maryland. That piece of paper changed how people looked at me. In 2010, I did the most surreal thing of my life. I opened an acceptance letter from Georgetown Law. The first day of criminal law class, the professor started talking about Crawford versus Washington, the case that saved my life. She asked, "Can anyone think of a real-world example where this ruling made a difference?" My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out, but I raised my hand. "Yes," she said. "Yeah," I answered. "Me. I was on death row. That case is why I'm sitting in this classroom instead of a cemetery. You know that silence where the air changes? Where everyone in the room suddenly realizes the world is much stranger and more brutal than they thought. That. Pin drop. The mission. Georgetown gave me a degree. Maryland gave me a bar card. Now I walk into the same courthouses that once tried to bury me, but I do it in a suit, carrying files instead of shackles. I started a nonprofit firm called Second Defense. We don't charge clients. They can't afford it anyway. Most are on death row, just like I was, saying the same words I said. I didn't do it. Please, someone listen. Most people think they're lying. I don't have that luxury. So far, we've freed 11 people who were sentenced to death. 11 human beings who were supposed to be vanished by the system and turned out to be innocent. Sometimes people ask if I'm angry. Don't you hate the state? Don't you want revenge? I won't lie. Some nights, yeah, the anger is there. The years aren't coming back. My mother died while I was inside. I never got to hug her as a free man for long. But anger is a bad engine. It burns hot, and then it eats you. What I have instead is something quieter and heavier, responsibility. Because I know, in my bones, what it feels like to count down the days to a death you don't deserve, to scream your innocence into a system that treats you like paperwork. I know the sound of a guard's footsteps and the taste of hopelessness. I know what it's like to hold a document in your hand and realize, if someone had read this 9 years ago, my entire life would have been different. So when a man in a cage tells me, I didn't do it, I don't roll my eyes. I say, okay, let's see what the paper says. Closing. Rise Untold calls my story unbelievable. The part that scares me is how many stories like mine nobody ever hears. They gave me a death sentence. I gave myself a law degree. Now I spend my life making sure the next kid with scratches on his arms and no alibi doesn't become a neat conviction for someone's press conference. 17 days before my execution, 8 words in an old logbook saved my life. If I have my way, the next Darius won't have to cut it that close. He had 17 days. 8 words. Rise Untold signature closing. One piece of paper that proved he was innocent. Now he's a lawyer freeing others from death row. What injustice are you willing to fight? Thanks for watching.